You think you're okay. You smile, you work, you keep going. But then, out of nowhere, something small cuts too deep. A tone, a silence, a memory, and suddenly you're not in control anymore. Something inside you flinches, you withdraw, you overthink. You wonder why you still feel this way, even after all this time. Carl Jung believed the answer isn't weakness, it's memory. Wounds we never faced don't vanish. They wait. They shape how we see, how we trust, how we live. But what if you could stop being ruled by the pain? What if nothing, and nobody, could ever hurt you the same way again? You think it's over, that what happened to you is done, buried, irrelevant. But then someone says something, nothing dramatic, just a careless word, and suddenly your chest tightens. You're not here anymore. You're back there, back in that moment, back in that feeling. That's the strange thing about pain. It doesn't live in the past. It waits, it hides in silence, and then it follows you into the present like a shadow you never invited but can't seem to shake. You're not being dramatic. You're not broken. You're just human. Most people walk around with invisible wounds, and because they can't be seen, we convince ourselves they don't count. But your nervous system remembers what your mind tries to forget. You flinch without knowing why. You withdraw before anyone even hurts you. You interpret a silence as rejection, a disagreement as betrayal. You call yourself sensitive, but the truth is, you're wounded. And the world keeps poking that wound over and over until your whole personality starts growing around it. Carl Jung believed we cannot become whole until we confront what hurt us. Not avoid, not suppress. Confront. Because the things you avoid don't just go away, they shapeshift. That heartbreak you never grieved becomes distrust. That humiliation you never voiced becomes perfectionism. That abandonment you buried turns into people-pleasing. Pain that isn't processed becomes personality. You may think you're fine, you function, you laugh, you work. But the unprocessed parts of you are always close to the surface. That's why small things hurt more than they should. Why you overreact and then feel ashamed. It's not the moment that's too much. It's the history behind it that's been building quietly for years. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. And this is where most people stay stuck. Not because they lack strength, but because no one ever taught them how to face what they've buried. But until you do, you'll keep dragging those same old wounds into every new moment, every new relationship, every opportunity that could have been different, if only you were free. So the question isn't whether you've been hurt. The question is, have you dared to stop running from it? Because if you haven't, it's not just the past that's haunting you, it's the present that's being stolen. And that brings us to the next truth, one that most people avoid their entire lives. You can't heal what you keep avoiding. You've been taught to move on, to stay strong, to not dwell on the past. So you push it down, you distract yourself, you tell yourself it wasn't that bad, that you're over it. But if that were true, why does it still show up? Why does it still shape the way you trust, the way you love, the way you flinch when someone gets too close? Because here's the hard truth. What you don't face doesn't disappear. It mutates. It finds another door, another disguise. Jung said, "What you resist persists." And he meant it, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. The more you run from the pain, the more it grows in the dark, unseen, unchallenged. It doesn't just sit there quietly. It seeps into your decisions. It becomes your tone of voice, your emotional distance, your need to be in control. You think you're avoiding the past, but really it's leading you. You keep saying you want to heal. But healing isn't a feeling. It's a confrontation. It's choosing to sit with the wound, to stop covering it with productivity, with people, with false positivity. Most people don't heal because they confuse avoidance with peace. But numbing isn't peace. Silence isn't resolution. Smiling through it isn't strength. Healing starts when you stop lying to yourself about how okay you are. Pain buried alive becomes behavior. That's why you keep dating the same kind of person. That's why you sabotage good things. That's why you explode over small things. Your shadow, your unprocessed emotions, your suppressed anger, your grief is not gone. It's guiding your life from behind the curtain. Jung called this the unconscious, the place where everything we refuse to deal with waits to be acknowledged. And here's the paradox. You're trying to feel safe by avoiding pain, but that avoidance is the very thing making you unsafe. Because anything you deny has power over you. You can't choose how to respond to a trigger you don't even recognize. You can't change a pattern you refuse to see. Real safety comes from integration, not running, not numbing, not pretending, but integrating the parts of you you've spent a lifetime rejecting. This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about freeing yourself. Because once you stop avoiding what hurt you, you can finally start becoming someone it no longer controls. And when that happens, when you face the very thing you thought would break you, you'll find something you didn't expect. You become untouchable. There's a moment, quiet, invisible, when you realize that the thing you were most afraid to face didn't destroy you. You looked at it. You felt it. You didn't run this time. And instead of breaking, you began to see something else. Power. Not the kind that controls others, but the kind that no one can take from you. That's what happens when you stop avoiding and start integrating. You stop being ruled by your wounds. You stop reacting from the shadows. You begin to reclaim yourself. Because here's the truth. People can only hurt you with what you haven't accepted. Your fear of not being good enough, your shame about the past, your need to be liked. These are the levers others unconsciously pull. But once you confront them, once you make peace with the parts you used to hide, the game changes. You become untouchable, not because you're invincible, but because you're whole. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were told to be, not who you perform as to be accepted, but your full self, light and shadow, strength and softness, all of it. It's not about being unaffected by life. It's about no longer collapsing under it. You still feel the pain, but you don't disappear into it. You carry it with clarity, not confusion. Before individuation, every criticism feels personal. Every rejection feels like proof. Every silence feels like punishment. But after, when you know who you are, those same things lose their grip. Because you're no longer living to avoid pain. You're living from awareness. You understand your triggers. You can see the story trying to pull you back, and you choose not to follow it. That's the shift, from being reactive to being rooted. You're not chasing validation. You're not auditioning for acceptance. You're not proving yourself to people who don't even know themselves. And that kind of self-possession feels like armor, but not the kind that hides, the kind that reveals. You stop being manipulated. You stop being a mirror for others' projections. Because you've taken your reflection back. And now, something sacred happens. You don't need the world to treat you perfectly. Because even when it hurts, it no longer breaks you. And that brings us to the final truth. One that most people spend their whole lives trying to escape. When you stop chasing a life without pain, you start becoming someone who can survive anything. Pain doesn't vanish just because you've healed. The world doesn't reorganize itself to reward your effort. People will still misunderstand you. Life will still cut deep. But here's the difference. You're no longer made of glass. You don't collapse when something breaks your rhythm, because you've met the breaking point before, and you learned how to stand back up. Most people chase a version of peace that feels like escape. They think if they become strong enough, wise enough, detached enough, pain won't touch them. But that's not peace, that's anesthesia. And anesthetized people don't feel joy either. They exist in the middle, safe but numb. Carl Jung offered something more courageous. He didn't say to become bulletproof, he said to become whole. That means allowing everything in, the grief, the love, the rage, the awe, and letting none of it define you. You stop trying to outrun suffering and instead learn how to hold it without letting it swallow you. This is where everything changes. You stop bracing for impact. You stop shrinking when life feels sharp. Because now you know, your capacity to feel pain is also your capacity to feel depth, meaning, beauty. To numb one is to numb them all. You still get hurt, but it doesn't destroy your clarity. You still feel sadness, but it doesn't drag you into stories of worthlessness. You still lose people, but you no longer lose yourself with them. That's what real strength looks like. Not the absence of emotion, but the presence of self, even when emotion floods the system. There's a kind of silence that lives inside you now. Not the silence of repression, the silence of knowing. You've seen what nearly broke you. You didn't run. You didn't pretend. You stayed. And because of that, nothing owns you anymore. You've become someone who no longer needs life to be easy to feel grounded. Someone who can hold both joy and sorrow in the same breath. That's the mark of wholeness. Not that you never fall, but that nothing can make you forget who you are. And in that space, you find something more powerful than safety. You find peace that doesn't depend on anything being different.